The Torrance mural was a competition from the California Arts Council / Office of the State Architect in Sacramento. And I was among, I don't know, 50, 60 people. And my idea was to do it as an underground religious painting, but to have artists who were the most underemployed people I know, since it was on an unemployment building, pose as I call it 6 LA artists, because every show that you would see was 5 LA artists, 4 LA artists, 12 LA artists, you know, so I put 6 LA artists. And I used all friends of mine, which it turned out, I discovered later, were all graduates of Otis Art Institute, now Otis College of Art and Design. I used Marta Chaffee Stang was the first figure, Alonzo Davis the second figure, Paul Serban in the middle. He was my Christ figure. I put a carpenter's bib around him. Oliver Nolan and Eloy Torres and Wayna Cato on the far right. I had Christ with Peter, James, and John in the middle, and the two Marys on the side. But I never said anything about it. It was underground, but it was on a government building, and so that's how it. But oddly enough, all these years, it's still there. This is almost 40 years later that I painted it in 1979. It's held up extremely well. And there was some vandalism on it, and the mayor of Torrance brought a team to come and restore it about at least 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago. And it's practically like new. I'm amazed. It's got to be one of the oldest extant murals from the mural movement era in Los Angeles. That button that Alonzo Davis is wearing was the second button. The first button I put on there was his button that he had designed that was sold all over Los Angeles that said, "Support your local artist," and it had a half of a watermelon on it. And that's the one I put on him because he was so famous for that button. But there was a big outcry inside the unemployment office that I was doing something racist. I tried to explain it to them. And I said, okay. So then I went to Alonzo, and he said, well, let's do this button. Another one of my symbols is an arrow going up for onward and upward. And so he gave me that button, and I put that up there instead. Originally, none of these buildings were here. You could see the mural all the way from Torrance Boulevard. But a Social Security office was put there, and then these apartments were placed here quite recently. So it's a little bit difficult to see it now, but it's still there. I had painted movie characters, Steve McQueen, Strother Martin, and the 3 television characters in my Otis mural. While I was at Otis, I began to think that I would move over and do a series of visual artists. To me, Ed Ruscha was like a McQueen type figure. He was like an individualist that I thought was an utterly unique character, and I would have him stand in for all California artists, especially those who came here from back east. The idea, the concept of LA rather than just a city. And Ed Ruscha really is one of those people that really got LA.
And he invited me to his studio over on Sunset Boulevard near Alvarado, and wanted to take a picture of me, and he had some idea to make a mural out of my puss. And I said, okay, can't imagine this, but you're going to put my image up on a tall building? Maybe at that time he wasn't quite positive about where it was going to go, because I think he had some options. And of course I've seen his forever. I'd seen the Old Lady of the Freeway, which is maybe a familiar title for for that, but I saw that almost daily going over the Hollywood freeway, and was always struck by the compelling nature of that mural. And then one day I was driving by there and it was gone. Time passed, and I think somebody told me, hey, your picture's up on the wall over on Hill Street. And going by there to see that, I was stunned. I just, you know, that it went into something that was so involved and took up so much real estate on the side of this building.
The mural I most enjoyed seeing painted downtown was a very tall one of Ed Ruscha. When that mural went up, I remember going by frequently watching the progress. Kent is meticulous. His paintings take a year or more. I think that one took over a year and a half to paint, the Ed Ruscha painting, which was destroyed by the building owner who thought he needed his building cleaned and got up there with a pressure washer without asking anyone and blew most of the painting off the wall. But that was a great painting. I think it established Kent as the premier muralist of LA.
During that time, I had interjected in 82 and 83 Gary Lloyd Monument, who was one of my first serious instructors when I was at Cal State Los Angeles, and a conceptual artist that I admired. And worked on him, got him done during 82 and 83, went back, worked on Ed Ruscha more, and then would take a break. I did I think I did Lita Albuquerque and Jim Morphesis, and then went back and finished Ed Ruscha. So it was like all these things going on kind of at the same time, which was interesting because once I got to know Ed Ruscha in his studio, he worked that way too. He had a bunch of projects going on all the time. He'd lose it on one, he would go and work on the other, so he doesn't have a lot of time wasted. I got a phone call. I always answer the phone. Whenever the phone rings, I rush to it because you never know who's going to call. This was Diane Canner one day in 1982. She had loved seeing my monuments to various people, I call them American cultural heroes, and she wanted an artist monument on this wall right in the middle of downtown, 5th and Town, which is just west of the Arts District now. And I decided I wanted to paint Gary Lloyd.
He called me to take a photograph of me because he wanted to make a mural of me. Monument to Gary Lloyd. Very nice. So I met him at his studio. Then it was replicated. He decided how to paint it. He made his studies, and then he painted it downtown at 5th and Town. There was a fish business, the Fish Company. It had been a big mural of a fish with the words, the Fish Company. So the wife of the husband and wife team that owned the business at the time commissioned a painting of me on their building.
And so I just used his face from here to here and put this 30-foot high face on the wall. And it took me a year over the course of 1982 to 1983 to paint the whole thing directly on the wall with the scaffolding and everything. And it was on City Seafoods, which her husband and her father-in-law owned and ran. And they couldn't figure out why I didn't do a fishing scene on it, you know. But she was, Diane Canner was the aesthetic ruler of the family, and she wanted an artist monument there. But unfortunately, when there was a divorce, that the husband, to spite the wife, I don't know, 10, 12 years later, painted it out just to spite her. I was up north giving my daughter away in June of 2006, and I got a phone call that my Ed Ruscha mural had been painted over.
You know, time passed, and the next thing I knew, they had removed that. I guess the government had come in and painted over it.
When Alonzo Davis got the idea of painting murals for the upcoming Olympics, the '84 Olympics. And so I decided to paint Jesus and Mary. And so I loved Lita Albuquerque's work from the time I saw her on the cover of Images and Issues in Arts magazine that was published in Los Angeles in the 80s, where she had done the Washington Monument shadow going across the green, and when it got right in the middle of the green, she had cut out the V where the top of Odalisque went, and she had put pigment in there temporarily and then covered it over, and then she took photographs of it with it. I just loved that kind of stuff. She was just a mind blower. So I always wanted to paint her, so I put her as Mary. And I've never said whether it was Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene, because it didn't matter. I would just open whatever you wanted to be. And then Jim Morphesis had painted himself. He had painted all these cruciforms. And in a lot of forms, he used to be a bodybuilder, and he looked like sort of a Greek statue. And he would put himself, a lot of people didn't realize that it was him in his face, but obscured by his painting technique. And so he was always painting himself as Jesus, but nobody knew it was him. So I thought, who better to use as Jesus than Jim Morphesis?
I was doing a lot of land art work with pigments, and I just completed a project at the Washington Monument that I think Kent had seen and was really very excited about. I was teaching and I was on my way out, and he caught me in the parking lot and he said, "Oh, do you have a second? I'm doing this mural down in East LA at the time that East LA was invisible, with 5 women artists, 5 men artists. Just put up your hands like that. Click. Thank you." And that was it.
In '83, I got a call from Kent, and he explained that he was doing or participating in the freeway murals as part of the arts program for the '84 Olympics. And he had in mind this mural where I would be across from the image of Lita Albuquerque. It became known as the 7th Street altarpiece. I thought that Kent's work had a lot to do with really personal, spiritual connections he made with these characters that he painted, including the Lone Ranger, other characters from 50s television that Kent and I both grew up with.
I called it the 7th Street altarpiece. So that gave kind of a hint as to what it was. But it was also a monument to Lita Albuquerque and a monument to Jim Morphesis, 2 separate pieces. And it was funny because I was the first one of all the murals to have something out on the freeway. And there were journalists and photographers from all over the world here because of the Olympics were coming. And there was nothing to do except me out there painting Lita Albuquerque. So I was all over the world in magazines because I was the only game in town.
Because of the Olympics, the image went around the world. In fact, someone's told me that they had it in Bangkok. Friends of mine did a book on murals, and it was in there, and of course he calls it the Los Angeles altarpiece, which is kind of wonderful. He did tell me later, I don't think he told me at the time, but he did tell me later that he felt that artists were like the gods and goddesses of contemporary life.
Graffiti vandalism became more and more blatant, and then finally Gray Davis got some money together to restore a lot of the more important murals, which included those 2.
And then he moved it, right? And the idea that he could move a mural was phenomenal. And so he called me up. This is when he called me up, and he said, "Oh, you know, I'm staring at one. Your hand is here, and your other hand is there." And I'm like, which was kind of great to learn about this technique that he had come up with of how to move the mural.
We restored those and moved them. We actually, with the Strapo method, vibrated them off from the wall and rolled them up like a carpet and moved them over at the base of that cathedral, our City of Angels or whatever, cathedral on, which is the Hollywood freeway. They call it the slot, the east-west slot. And so now they're under Grand Avenue and retrofitted to mix those two, to be in those two spaces, which are even better spaces than the originals.
It was always a great thing, and always a great thing to have, you know, the fact that it was called an altarpiece, the fact that I know what Kent's work is about. It's very spiritual. My work is very spiritual. Now what's amazing is that it's under Broadway, overlooking the cathedral, and I did the entire entrance courtyard to the cathedral with the fountain there, and I placed the fountain in a star map. I sandblasted a star map of where the stars were at over Los Angeles on September 2nd, 2002, which is when the cathedral is consecrated. So it's like I'm the guardian of this, another kind of sacred space. So all these very kind of interesting synchronicity with that. And I think when I mean, Kent has that kind of energy about him.
Doing work that is of a spiritual nature, not trying to hide it, yeah. In this town, I think it's very subversive. So I think that, and you know, most people with Kent, since he's so quiet and so kind of mysterious himself, yeah, he's kind of this subversive character that you don't think of at first when you think of Kent. But I think that if it's good art, if it's important art, it's supposed to be subversive. I think which isn't evident to a lot of people is the edge to Kent and Kent's works. At first you see these meticulously rendered, beautifully executed portraits, but there's a lot more going on. I think that they also are mysterious too. So you have to take some time. And flying by some of Kent's work at 60 miles an hour, maybe you don't take that time. But I think you're always left, even after you see them, with, you know, what was that really about? You know, the hands up, or that particular figure, or why is it that person? I always saw Kent's works as icons, kind of traditional icons.
I've seen in Look magazine, I think, a picture of Picasso, a black and white photograph of Picasso looking through a window, and he had his hands up to the window.
I also thought that they were very much like cave paintings too. You kind of feed off of them, like early men and women lived off of the animals that you see on a cave painting. They became a part of them. They couldn't exist without them. So that's why they honored them on cave walls. I think to a large degree, that's something that's going on in Kent's work. He sees kind of a spiritual offering through the characters that he paints and the way that he paints them. And this is what he offers. It's not, I think people may think that there's something special about them, there's something mysterious about them, but I think that's part of them, and maybe it's obvious to some people, probably not to most people, but I do think it's there. That's why I think you're always left with, you know, there's a large portrait, but there's something else going on, something else to ponder in his work, because it's, for most people, very subtle.
It was a Picasso looking through the framework looking at the world through the framework of a picture plane. And it was also the idea of what creativity is the mind and the hand. And it has to go from the mind into the hand to become manifest into the world. And finally, and more importantly, it was sort of the American Indian symbol for no weapons.